do not run after the titles. Do not run after the money. Let them be the consequences of what you do. When you are actually at the junction of making a choice between getting the title and money versus getting the right amount of experience for you to grow both professionally and personally, I would urge you guys to make the choice of later in terms of taking an experience which will actually make you much more richer. And believe me or not, forget about the long run. In the middle, in the medium run, it will pay you. It will give you a title which is much bigger than what would you have done if you had taken the earlier choice.
Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so that you never miss an update. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very tall leader from the global supply chain business, Mr. Sreenivas Rao Nandigam, who's the Senior Vice President of Sun Pharma for supply chain. Srini, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and it's a privilege to be on your show, Ashutosh.
Thank you so much. Srini, currently, as I mentioned, is the Senior Vice President and Global Supply Chain Head of Sun Pharma, and earlier he was with Unilever and Reckitt Benckiser. So, Srina, we have said that we're going to speak today primarily on the supply chain. It's a part of business which is so critical for industry and yet hasn't yet got its place in the sun that it deserves. So let me start by asking you, I'm much older than you, but when I was growing up in the corporate world, we used to have an accountant, we used to have personnel manager, and we used to have a purchase manager. Today, all three of these so-called service functions are C-suite executives. What has changed and evolved for the purchase manager to become the chief supply chain officer?
That's a very, very good question, Ashutosh. And in fact, I agree that, you might be actually 10 to 15 years ahead of me. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, perhaps the purchase manager and accountant got merged. And around, let's say, 10, 15 years after you actually were in that, it became what was called as the commercial manager at that point in time. Okay. And from commercial manager, I have actually seen people becoming, and then after the commercial manager, then there were logistics managers and so on and so forth. So today, in fact, and I still recollect 20 years ago when there was a very senior executive coming in from Unilever, and we had to make a presentation, and that was the first time around, I would say then, we said, listen, let's talk about holistic supply chain. And we said that, plan, source, make, and deliver. These are the 4 baskets of supply chain. That was the first time, to be honest with you, I got introduced myself to supply chain because I don't have a training, a formal training, so to say, in supply chain per se, from my college days. Of course, I got trained over the years and took some training courses here and there, but not in the college. Yeah. So from, as you rightly put across, to a purchase manager, now supply chain actually has 4 baskets in a manner of speaking. Planning, sourcing, which is the purchase part, manufacturing, which is the make part, which is the operations, and some sectors of the organizations do actually keep it under supply chain. Some actually keep it as operations, typically which are manufacturing intensive, like the automobiles or let's say the pharmaceuticals, they keep it outside of supply chain. And then the deliver, which is essentially the logistics bit, which is from the warehouses of the factories till the customer end, is now a part of the supply chain. Coincidentally, in the current role of mine and in the avatar of mine, actually, it's not just that bit, but, the element of actually collecting the receivables from the buyers, which is our distributors in India, is a part of the supply chain role. So supply chain, as you said, has evolved over a period of time. And this particular role is very unique now in some form for me that, the supply chain is responsible for maintaining outstanding, because we do give credit to our distributors. There are about 8,000 distributors of ours. And it's been great fun looking at the journey.
Amazing. And yet, the pharma industry is a very unique industry in that it's the only one that I know which has a reverse supply chain.
Indeed.
So talk to me for all our listeners on this reverse supply chain. I mean, when medicines are 30 days away from expiry, you take them back.
Yep. I think it's again a very important element of this reverse supply chain. Is a very important element for pharma. Two reasons. Actually, coincidentally, Ashutosh, the cold drinks or the beverage industry in the good old days when it used to be in glass bottles, used to have a reverse supply chain which was much more intensive than
the empties, right?
Right. But having said that, I will not touch base on that because that is something which is very commonly known everybody that glass bottles had to be brought back and recycled. 90% of the beverages are moved from glass to non-recyclable glass or glass to PET, as the whole world knows about it now. But having said that, coming back closer home to the pharma supply chain, more than legislation, it's industry norm that we do take back the medicines within 30 days of expiry.
Correct.
Before expiry, actually. The reason for that is that even when the patients are actually buying the medicines, we don't want the patients, even by chance, to consume those medicines, and have any side effects or of that sort. By legislation, in some countries, you are expected to take it back. And in India, it's a mix of more than the legislation. It's the industry norm we take it back because we also do not want the patients to get impacted on that. So what is the amount of goods which we typically take back? And it goes all the way. A patient in India can actually go back to the chemist and give it back as long as they have the receipt for the purchases, and he or she will get the complete free money back from the chemist. And it's the responsibility of the responsibility and ownership of the manufacturer to take care of the expiries across the value of the supply chain. But as it may so happen, Ashutosh, I can tell you that because we typically take back, let's say, 2% of our goods. Out of the 2%, a large proportion of that happens to be from the new product development because we are not in a position to predict how the new products will actually do, how the doctors will prescribe those particular new products, and how the consumers will or the patients will actually react to them, and so on and so forth. But having said that, it may not be very large, unlike the beverage bottles, but it's a very, very important element because there can be a lot of side effects to the patients who are consuming.
Correct. Well said. Yeah. So, now let's talk about the pandemic, which has impacted supply chains all over the world. My question to you is that how has the pharma business reacted to the incredible constraints of the supply chain, because a very large number of your APIs used to come from China? You must have had to really scramble to get alternative sources.
Indeed. That's been a very, very tough and a challenging task, Ashutosh. There is no doubt about that. And so there were two things which happened simultaneously during the pandemic. One, of course, the movement of goods were restricted because of the pandemic. And two, there was this motion against the Chinese manufactured goods for good, bad, ugly.
Correct.
Yeah? So the geopolitical impact also was there. Now, both of them were hard hitting to us because, as you rightly said, the industry in general relied a lot upon sourcing their active pharmaceutical ingredients from China. Having said that, industry is also fortunate because what had happened is that about 5 years ago, and do not forget, one of the reasons why Chinese actually took over a lot of API manufacturing was huge amount of pollution which happens because of the manufacturing.
Correct.
And Chinese legislation allowed a lot of API manufacturing for the last 20 odd years. In the last 15 years, in the last 5 years, my apologies, I would say that Chinese legislation also became stricter for pollution. And you would have heard those traffic jams in Beijing and the whole 9 yards, which were actually happening. All of them tightened the rules on manufacturing of API. So fortunately, a lot of pharma companies started actually localizing and indigenizing and finding alternates for China in the last 4 to 5 years. Be that as it may, but still the industry could not go to less than 3 stages beyond API. While APIs were not being sourced, the chemicals were being sourced actually from there. So it did have a huge impact. There were, as I said, both the issues. One is, of course, because China was the first to get impacted from a pandemic perspective, and there were a lot of lockdowns which impacted from an availability standpoint. And the second is the logistical challenge. So we also resorted to things like charter flights from China to bring materials, and dedicated charter ships also we took for chemicals, and we paid a ton of money for the logistics.
Sure.
And fortunately or unfortunately, Ashutosh, going back, from a patient perspective also, the patients actually look at, the medicine from an expiry date perspective, unlike in the food industry from a manufacturing date perspective.
Correct.
Okay. And because the value density of the goods is so large, typically pharma companies operate with larger level of inventories. So two things which helped us: larger level of inventories, which actually kept us going a lot. And number two, we actually did our innovative ways of chartering the flights and ships to actually bring in the chemicals and entities, so on and so forth from China. So these were the two things. But we had to really scramble. There's no doubt about that. And, we were also able to kind of develop some Indian vendors in the meanwhile to be able to kind of become more independent.
True. Well said. So, Sri, now let's talk a little bit about technology. I mean, 10 years ago, if you asked someone in company what technology is the supply chain using, it was probably just ERP. Right? Now, what I'm hearing from people is artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, drones being considered to supply vaccines. The entire space of the supply chain has been widened very dramatically. I would love to get your perspective.
Fantastic question, Ashutosh. Again, I am basically a big watcher of technology by the way, yeah? And big follower of technology. And when I say technology, the new age technology, let me put it this way. Life has changed dramatically, as you rightly said, ERPs. And ERPs also used to be like ERPs on your own system, on your own servers. From there, actually, people moved to ERPs on cloud, which actually reduced the cost for smaller companies. And for larger companies, also, it made it much more faster, and so on and so forth. Coming to supply chain, planning technologies, and I keep actually talking about this thing. In the 4 baskets, the first basket of plan, I keep saying that, forecasting, it starts with forecasting. Our forecast accuracies on a good day are like 70%. And I keep saying that, we are actually operating in known markets, known customers, known consumers, and known, environment. Why is it that we cannot go beyond 70% in terms of our forecast accuracies? If a weatherman, where he does not know anything, can forecast weather with an accuracy of 95% plus, why on earth is supply chain not able to actually forecast their demand at an accuracy of, let's say, even at 85%? So this is a question. And believe me or not, all the technologies which you're talking about, the AI, the machine learning, and the statistical forecasting and so on and so forth, are getting evolved. It is not going to be long that we will actually use all these technologies for improving and fine-tuning our own supply chain. To give you an example, Amazon actually works with, let's say, take an example of India, works with, let's say, about 50 fulfillment centers in the country. And they are actually shipping goods from one center to another, etc., in anticipation of the demand which is going to come, so that they can service their customers within the same day or the next day after. So all these technologies are getting used, and those are the companies which will be successful, which are going to actually embark upon usage of these technologies, fine-tune their ways of working, sharpen their pencil, and make sure all the benefits are available for their customers and consumers. That's the only way forward. There's no other way.
Fascinating. Absolutely
And,
fascinating.
and one more small point which I would like to add, Ashutosh, is what I call as convergence of technologies. Yeah. And I am going to deviate a little bit from supply chain here. And it's even go back in history. The inflection point, the adoption of technologies has never been linear. It has always been an S curve. Yeah. And even if you take, for example, the horse carts moving to the automobiles, has happened in the span of 13 years.
Correct.
Okay. Tony Seba talks of this particular example in his very famous video, that within a span of 13 years, on the streets of New York, from actually one automobile, it became one horse cart. That's the stark difference. It doesn't take ages to kind of convert from one to another, and everything is actually economically driven.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But, let me now move to another aspect of supply chains, and that is partially being affected by the pandemic, which is work from home, and partially being affected by the e-commerce platforms. What has happened is that with more and more people working from home, I am now, as a consumer, getting used to getting my food in 30 minutes. If I'm an Amazon Prime customer, I'm getting used to getting it delivery next day. What is this kind of customer expectation doing to the supply chains in all these companies?
Fantastic question, Ashutosh. The reason I'm saying is because as we speak, the industry as a consortium is actually working to digitize in India. Okay. I'm talking very specifically in India. Pharma as an industry is very, very distributed. Okay. There are roughly about 800,000 chemists in the country, 100,000 distributors, and there is no dedicated distributor, and the distributor does not have a region or a geography for him to serve. Why I'm actually giving you this background is because it requires digitization, specifically so when you are so distributed. And the work becomes so much more difficult in a distributed environment than in a concentrated environment. Yeah. So what has happened is in the recent past, it would be in the public arena, and I can speak of it now, that the industry consortium has actually taken over two small companies. One is called AVAX, AIOCD, and the other is called Pharma Rank. These are doing nothing. They do not own anything. They only digitize the product being moved from company to distributor and distributor to the chemist.
Fantastic.
Okay. Now, the next step is, of course, from a chemist or let's say chemist to the patient, which is what you are talking about in terms of the expectation. And there are various companies which are doing it. And the next step could be that. The consortium of industries has actually invested in these two companies taking over. And they said that they would like to drive the digitization in this country and make sure that the patients are also, the expectations of the patients are fulfilled on the lines of Amazon and the hyper local delivery of the food delivery and so on and so forth. I must also confess that pharma as an industry is a late entrant into many of these things. And I would say rightfully so, because what happens is you're dealing with the lives of the people. You do not want fake medicines to go to the patients, for example. Yeah. And that's the reason why adoption of technology is a little late in the pharma. They would like to see well-honed technology working very well for other industries, and therefore then they adopt it. I don't know if I've been able to give a
No, you have. I remember when I founded Guardian Pharmacy and ran it and built it into India's second largest chain. One of my biggest frustrations was why medicines were not barcoded.
Absolutely.
I'm talking of
you hit the nail on the head.
Time back, isn't it? So,
and it still is the same way, Ashutosh, believe me or not. If I were to go and buy a 5 rupee soap, it is a barcoded soap.
Correct.
Even if I want to buy a 5,000 rupee injection, it's not barcoded. The chemist has to do the barcoding.
Correct.
We are all questioning these things. These are all the questions which I am asking. And it will actually improve the authenticity of the medicine if you have a 2D barcode and so on. So the industry is actually moving towards that.
Correct. Very good.
Very late though, I must say.
Very, very nice. And on a personal level, I'm so delighted the pharma industry is doing this. Wonderful. So Srini, I'm now going to move to a few questions for you personally. My first question to you is that in a career so successful, Unilever, Reckitt Benckiser, and now Sun Pharma, what would you say are 3 milestones or pivot points in your life or your career?
It's a very personal question. I keep telling people that I am more luckier than perhaps I deserve. Okay.
Right.
And believe me or not, it's not my humility which is speaking, but I am indeed lucky. So the first pivot point is, and if you're asking me what are the 3 steps in very simplistic way, the 3 different companies I work for are the 3 different steps. Yeah. But I went for my master's and actually did my master's in robotics in IIT Kanpur, and from there on, I was not destined to actually go and work for Unilever. It so happened that we actually went and pursued the interviewers that why don't you actually look at the master's guys also, and they did, and they liked me, and then they recruited me. I was actually not sure whether I should or not, and I joined, and the rest is history, of course. Yeah. After that, Reckitt Benckiser was a fantastic movement for me, where I actually got an opportunity to kind of handle multi-country, multi-region opportunity, and now I'm the global head of supply chain. So if you were to ask me personally, I think these are the 3 different stepping stones for my career.
Correct.
And God has been more than kind to me, to be honest.
Wonderful. And as you look back at life and as you look ahead, from where you stand today, what does success mean to Srini?
As they say, success is as what others see in you, and satisfaction is what you actually get. Believe me or not, in the last 30 years of my career, the last 2 years of my career has been most satisfying. Reason for that is very simple. During the pandemic time, I felt that I was being able to actually service a lot of patients and save so many lives. And that has actually given me personally a lot of satisfaction, right? In the 30 years of my career, the last 2 years, it's not about the position, it's not about the title, it's not about anything else, but the personal satisfaction which I got out of the fact that, we are able to kind of get the medicines across to the patients and save lives. I don't know whether I answered your question.
Absolutely.
Dodged it to make it into a satisfaction.
No, it's a great response. And a follow-up question to success is that who or what inspires you?
Well, I think I mentioned that, Elon Musk is one guy whom I follow very well. And there's another gentleman called Tony Seba. Yeah, I would recommend everybody to kind of look up Tony Seba on Google, and he's a thought thinker. What actually inspires me is disruptions, not incremental stuff, right? When I say disruption, so there are 2 things. The first is doing the same things with increased efficiency, and the second thing is doing different things with a step-level incremental efficiency. Yeah? What inspires me is actually the later on, which means usage of technology, usage of new age stuff to be able to bring in completely different level of efficiency. Let me give you a personal example. And as you mentioned a little while ago, Amazon or any of this hyperlocal delivery, if I order my food on Zomato, the value of the food is like 150 rupees. I get it in half an hour.
Yeah.
And I can actually keep tracking 7 minutes to go, 8 minutes to go. When I am shipping my goods from factories in a truck, the value of the truck is more than ₹1 crore. I don't even know if till the time the transporter comes back and tells me that, sir, your truck has been hijacked in the Bihar. That's not acceptable to me. Yeah. We haven't utilized the technology in a lot of areas where we should be. a crore rupees worth of truck actually vanishing away in the middle of Bihar and I getting to know through somebody else, not acceptable. So these are the things which actually inspire me to kind of make changes.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. And my now last question to you, and this is for the thousands of young people who will watch and listen to our conversation. As someone who's made it so big in industry, what would your advice be to a young individual who's starting off on her or his career in the corporate world?
My simple piece of advice is that, and I will tell you from my personal experiences, that do not run after the titles. Do not run after the money. Let them be the consequences of what you do. When you are actually at the junction of making a choice between getting the title and money versus getting the right amount of experience for you to grow both professionally and personally, I would urge you guys to make the choice of later in terms of taking an experience which will actually make you much more richer. And believe me or not, forget about the long run. In the middle, in the medium run, it will pay you. It will give you a title which is much bigger than what would you have done if you had taken the earlier choice. That's my simple thing for people who are starting young. There is a lot of energy when you are young, and keep that energy going by way of learning new things, by way of actually, adding value to yourself and to the company. That's my simple piece of advice to you.
And that's what fantastic advice. Srini, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for taking me on this incredible journey that you've had in the supply chain and some of the amazing thoughts you've given me on technology and so many other aspects of supply chain. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Ashutosh, and an honor to be on the show. Thank you indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.